For Christians, the idea of Jesus' resurrection is absolutely central to our faith. Paul says in Romans, if you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. I want to start this message today by saying something you'll probably hear me say every Easter, because it's kind of fun for me to say, and it's a neat way of kind of looking at things. Because there's a lot of people out there that aren't so sure about the resurrection of Jesus. And when you think about it, the resurrection really doesn't make a lot of sense. Aside from Jesus and aside from Lazarus and aside from just a few other isolated instances in the Bible, do you know anyone that died and came back to life? Anybody? No. Maybe you have been part of a bona fide miracle. I don't know. I'm not trying to say it's impossible. But it's not a real common thing. So with that, a lot of theories exist to say Jesus didn't really come back from the dead. Muslim belief says Jesus didn't go to the cross at all, that it was a substitute. That this substitute, whomever it was made by God to look like Jesus, so people only thought that it was Jesus who died on the cross. One theory that I saw says that it was Judas that went to the cross. Another theory says that Simon of Cyrene, the man that helped carry the cross on the way to Golgotha, was the one that was crucified. Another idea says that Jesus might have asked for volunteers to go to the cross for him. As I understand, Muslims still believe Jesus ascended to heaven. It's just they don't believe that he died and came back to life beforehand. So this is one way that people will try and explain away the process or the idea of the resurrection. There's another theory that takes a more scientific approach to it. This theory says that Jesus didn't really die on the cross. He was crucified, absolutely, but it only looked like he died. And I really like talking about this one because on the surface it kind of makes sense. So this is what some people will say happened on a hill just outside of Jerusalem some 2,000 years ago. And you can take everything that I'm about to say with a grain of salt. I'm not a doctor. I am not an expert in crucifixion. I'm not an expert in execution or end-of-life things. I'm just a guy that didn't become a weatherman because he failed pre-calculus his freshman year of college. So the idea that I'm going to try to debunk today says that it usually takes days or at least one full day for someone to die from crucifixion. And our biblical accounts tell us that Jesus was only on the cross for a few hours. So why would Jesus die in just a few hours when it takes anyone else days to die on the cross? And again, I'm not expert in the act of crucifixion, but this seems like a valid question when you put things together. People don't generally come back from the dead. Maybe Jesus wasn't actually dead when he came down from the cross. But let me tell you why this theory does not pass the sniff test. The first thing is the Romans. The Romans are professional soldiers. They know what they're doing. They know how to crucify someone. They know how to make someone as miserable as possible before they die. This ain't their first rodeo. Remember, the legs of the other two, it wasn't just Jesus at Golgotha that day. There was a criminal on either side of him. The legs of the other two were broken as they take the three down. Why didn't they break Jesus' legs? It's because they thought he was already dead. Why did they think he was dead? Well, did they hook up a heart monitor to him so they could take a look at what was going on? Maybe they shocked him with the defibrillator, tried to bring him back a little bit so they could break his legs and then take him down? No. Did they take his blood pressure? No, he's got no. They have one of those little pulse oximeter things on his finger to check if he had a pulse? No, of course not. So did the professional Roman soldiers just say, well, this guy looks dead. He's probably dead. Let's just take him down and say that he is. Of course not. Do you remember what they did? They jabbed a spear into his side. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if I'm slightly alive, and they jab a spear into my side, I might react a little bit to that. Remember, the theory that we're talking about is that Jesus wasn't dead. Everyone just thought he was. That it wasn't possible for Jesus to die on the cross in that short of a time. Now, according to Mark's gospel, Jesus was crucified. The act of crucifixion is when they're nailed to the cross. He was crucified at 9 in the morning. At noon it becomes dark, At 3 p.m., Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And shortly thereafter, Jesus died. About 6 hours on the cross. Again, for the sake of argument, let's say that Jesus was still alive. He was mercilessly scourged. He was beaten very badly. He was then crucified. He spent 6 hours on the cross. And from what I've read, the way someone dies when they're on the cross is from suffocation. So you're up on that cross, and all of your muscles are trying to keep your chest up and open so you can breathe. But after a while, you just become so weak that you hunch over and you literally suffocate to death. He spends 6 hours like that. And then after all this, he's stabbed in the side with a spear. But for the sake of argument, let's say he survived all of that. The Romans were wrong. Jesus was still alive when they took him down from the cross and he was buried. If Jesus was still alive when they took him down from the cross, I'm going to tell you about a different miracle that happened that Easter morning. How long was Jesus in the tomb? He was raised on the third day. Okay, so we have Friday's the first day, Saturday's the second day, Sunday's the third day. Raised on the third day. At very most, Jesus was in the tomb for about 39 hours. Here's how we figure that out. Jesus died around 3 p.m. Friday. And we consider that sunrise in Jerusalem this morning, March 31st, 2004, sunrise in Jerusalem this morning was 6:29 a.m. That Sunday, nearly 2,000 years ago, it would have been similar. Jesus would have left the tomb before sunrise. We read in John chapter 20, verse 1, it says, "Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark," before sunrise, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. It was still dark when Mary Magdalene got there, probably a little before 6 a.m. 3 p.m. Friday to 6 a.m. Sunday is roughly 39 hours. Again, for the sake of argument, let's say Jesus wasn't dead. He was simply so beaten, so weak, so sick, so defeated from what happened that everybody, including the highly trained Roman soldiers and those preparing his body for burial that Friday afternoon, mistook him for dead and declared him dead. The implication of saying Jesus didn't die and come back to life is to say that Jesus was merely human. He was not God, that no miracle of the resurrection took place. If all that's true, here is where our new miracle takes place. If Jesus was still alive when he was buried, in those 39 hours or so, Jesus had no food, Jesus had no water, he had very little oxygen in a sealed tomb, and he had absolutely no medical care whatsoever. No modern medical care, no first century medical care. Yet he had the strength after 39 hours to get up, take off his burial clothes, find the entrance to the tomb in the dark, roll the stone away so he could get out of the tomb, then stroll away from the tomb without the Roman guards noticing anything. What's more plausible here? That a merely human Jesus spontaneously recovered in a matter of hours with no medical care from a beating so severe at the hands of Roman soldiers and a crucifixion that so weakened him to the point everyone thought he was dead, then he was stabbed in the side with a spear with no reaction, but he was still alive. Is that more plausible, or is it more plausible that Jesus died, was buried, and rose from the dead? For us as believers, it's easy. Resurrection from the dead makes so much more sense than the alternative. There's another point that I want to bring up that was made many years ago by a man named Charles Colson. How many of you guys were around for the Nixon administration? In my last church, I would have been the only one not raising my hand, so this is kind of fun. So Richard Nixon was president back in the 70s. If you look up the Watergate time frame, it's an interesting time of history. Well, Charles Colson was part of the Nixon administration, and from what I've read, he was not a real nice guy. He was embroiled in this Watergate fiasco, and he was sent to go to prison for his involvement when he converted to Christianity. And some people at the time thought he converted simply to get a reduced sentence. it was a ploy just to get a reduced sentence, but he probably did become an actual Christ follower. Well, Colson, in talking about the resurrection of Jesus, says this. He says, I know the resurrection is a fact, and Watergate proved it to me. How? Because 12 men testified that they had seen Jesus raised from the dead, and they proclaimed that truth for 40 years, not once denying it. Everyone was beaten, tortured, stoned, and put in prison. They would not have endured that if it weren't true. Watergate embroiled 12 of the most powerful men in the world, and they couldn't keep it a lie for 3 weeks. You're telling me 12 apostles could keep a lie for 40 years? Absolutely impossible. We celebrate the resurrection of Jesus today. We celebrate the life we have because of his sacrifice on the cross and his coming back from the dead. We celebrate that we can love because he first loved us. A couple weeks ago, I was in Omaha for a conference, a Prairie Pastors Conference, and I had a great time reconnecting with some old friends. We had some wonderful speakers. We had our General Secretary of ABC USA. We had the President of the ABC USA Board. Another speaker was Rob Lone, who is part of a group called Vantage Point 3. Vantage Point 3 does Christian discipleship and mentorship programs. But him, in one of his sessions, he spoke a lot on relationship. The importance of relationship for Christians, the importance of it for our growth as Christ followers, and the importance of it for our overall health as people. For those of us that are believers, I pray that we all understand that a lot of the language we use really doesn't make a lick of sense to those outside of the faith. You guys realize that, right? Do you hear God talking to you now? Makes sense to us, but how crazy does that sound to somebody that doesn't know Jesus? We like to call each other brother and sister all the time. Like that sounds a little odd if you're not accustomed to what we do. And I think one of our favorite phrases that we use is in response when we tell others about Jesus, in response to our efforts to evangelize. We start telling somebody about Jesus, or we invite them to come to church, and they'll often respond with, well, I had a bad experience at church one time, or I don't like religion. Oh, it's already triggering in some of your heads right now, I can tell. You're already thinking it. Because when we hear that answer, I don't like religion, it goes in our heads right off the bat. And I want you to say it with me, because I know you're thinking it. It's not about religion, it's about relationship. And see, I knew it was in your heads. I knew it. And it's a true statement. I'm not going to tell you that that's not true. But if you're outside of the fellowship of Christ's followers, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Christianity really is about following the person of Jesus Christ, being in a relationship with the God of the universe. But we need to do a better job explaining to people what that means, and I think we need to do a better job often living out that truth. Because that relationship is also what makes Christian life tricky sometimes. Relationships can be difficult. And the truth is, relatively speaking, rules are easy. The law is easy. Think about it from a perspective of the laws of this country, from the laws that we follow every single day. We have Highway 36 running right out in front of the church here. What is the speed limit right out here in front of the church on Highway 36? 65 miles an hour. If you go 66 miles per hour out there, technically, you are breaking the law. Now, I know it's not real likely you're going to get pulled over and ticketed for going to 66, but you could. That's how law works. At one point, you're legal. At the next point, you're not. Now, I'm not a law-talking guy. I know it's more complex than that. But if you go into your bank and you walk up to the teller and say, I would like to withdraw $20 from my checking account. They give you $20, it comes out of your checking account. That's fine. If you go in and try to rob that bank, that's not fine. Right? Don't do that. Don't rob your bank. So when it comes to the law, you're either within the law or you're breaking the law. And of course, the implementation of that law gets fuzzy within our judicial system today. But when it comes to religious law, when it comes to God's law, the cut and dry black and white legalism is so much easier than relationship. Because then we can say, well, those people over there, those people are sinners. But us people over here, we're righteous. I think that's why fundamentalism, which really has a clear line of delineation between sinner and righteous, I think that's why it's so popular among some people. And I think a lot of people don't even realize how fundamentalist we can be sometimes when it comes to that clear line. Within that legalism, we start to separate people out. We group the sinners over there, and us righteous can stay over here. If you're with us righteous over here, don't associate with those sinners over there. Over there, that's where people that have done drugs are. You got to stay away from them. Over there, that's where the LGBTQ plus people are. Don't talk to them. Over there, that's where all the criminals hang out. Just let them do their thing. Over there, that's where people that have cheated on their wife or their husband, that's where they spend time. Don't venture that way. Now, I'm not trying to excuse sinful behavior. I'm not trying to say that sin isn't sin. But who did Jesus spend his time with? Who did the Pharisees complain? What did the Pharisees complain so much about when it came to Jesus? He dined with sinners and tax collectors. For the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, it was easy. When they saw someone outside of the law of Moses, they avoided them. They didn't associate with them. But Jesus did. Jesus developed relationships with people. He especially developed relationships with people who, according to the law, he shouldn't have spent time with prostitutes, with adulterers, with sinners, with tax collectors. One of the 12 was a tax collector. Remember, though, when Jesus called people to follow him, he was calling them to leave their previous life behind. That sinful behavior, the bad behaviors that they had before, they needed to end. Matthew did not remain a tax collector when he followed Jesus. He left life behind. Jesus told the rich young man, "Sell everything you have, give the money to the poor, then come follow me." Did the rich young man do that? No, he did not. He could not leave that life behind. Jesus says in John's Gospel, just after the Lord's Supper, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. This is my command: love each other." Now, to us, to our human brains, this sounds a little odd. If you want to be my friend, do everything I tell you to do. Doesn't sound quite right in our human brains, does it? But what Jesus is saying to them, listen, you are not my servants. You are my friends. And it has to be a different relationship than we have with our earthly friends, because none of our earthly friends is God. Jesus is elevating the disciples to a closer to equal position. Now, of course, they and we will never become God, but it's an invitation to be in relationship with Jesus and be part of the work that he's doing. So why do I say relationships are more difficult than rules? Well, when we hear relationship, we, believers and non-believers alike, we begin to make comparisons to the relationships that we have in our lives. And our relationships are often messy, even with those closest to us, especially with those closest to us. Let me put it this way. If you can sit there and tell me that you've never had a disagreement or an argument with your best friend, I am going to assume that's because you have known that person for 2 days and you're in first grade. maybe not even 2 days. Most of you are married. I truly pray your spouse is your best friend. Do you ever disagree with your spouse? Be very careful if you answer that out loud. Of course we have disagreements. Of course we have disagreements with those closest to us. We have disagreements with those that we love the most. Relationships are messy because everyone is different. We do things different ways. So if we think about the struggles we have in our relationships and compare our human interactions to our relationship with God, we can really start to think it's going to be messy. Unfortunately, humans can be dishonest. Humans can have ulterior motives to our actions. We can be deceptive. Humans can appear to be kind or loving when we're actually exploiting or using someone. But that isn't God's nature. God is love. Our job is not to separate out the sinners from the righteous. God will take care of that. That's God's job. Our job is to spread the good news of Jesus Christ. Our job is to tell as many people we can about it because we don't know who is yet to be saved. Our job is to go and make disciples. Our job is to go and tell people on that first Easter morning Jesus came back from the dead. My question to you this morning is this: do you believe in your heart God raised His one and only Son, Jesus Christ, from the dead? Is Jesus Christ your Lord? Paul tells us in Romans that the wages of sin is death. I preached on this about a month or so ago in our Faith 101 series. Paul says the wages of sin is death. Wages are something that we earn. The paycheck you get every 2 weeks from your job, from your employer, is what you have earned from what you've done. That's the wage you receive. If the wages of sin is death, and all of us have sin in our lives, remember, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, it means that all of us have earned death. All of us deserve death, eternal death. But, that's the greatest part of that verse right there. 3-letter word, but. But the gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus our Lord. A gift is not something you earn. You earn your wage, but a gift is freely given. When we give someone a gift, it should be with no strings attached. It should be given with no expectation of anything in return. We cannot be giving gifts out of obligation. I don't give gifts to people because I feel I have to. I give gifts to people because I want them to know that I care for them. I give gifts to my nephews because I love them. The gift of God, freely given, freely received. It cannot be earned. It cannot be bought. It can only be accepted. The gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus our Lord. He went to the cross for you. He came back from the dead for you. And if you have not yet received it, stop trying to earn salvation because you can't. Be saved by grace through faith in Jesus Christ. Accept the gift that God is offering to you today.